Hello, and welcome to Book Circle. I'm Earl Weinberg. This time we will continue our reading of Aunt Jenny and the Delayed Quest by Jim Burrows. Aunt Jenny has just rescued a ghost from the bottom of a lake, a poisoned lake. Having rescued the ghost, she needs to go back and take care of the poison. "Comm check complete, and we're ready for liftoff," said Jenny. Finna smiled. "Then lift you I shall." Grasping Aunt Jenny under the arms, she rose slowly into the air and then spread her wings. Morwenna played out the rope as Jenny guided Finna to a spot just above the heart. Once they arrived, Finna raised her wings high over her head, out of the way, and gently descended to the water. "Are you ready, Aunt Jenny?" "Yes, Finna." Finna descended further until both her legs and Aunt Jenny's were well into the water. "Hold the jar firmly." "I am." Finna sank to waist depth, and then, as the jar and Jenny's arms entered the water, Finna carefully released her. Aunt Jenny bobbed for a few seconds, then said, "I'm going to try to sink to the bottom, like when I was walking." "Understood," said Sasha. Finna rose up out of the water. "I'm out of your way." Aunt Jenny's crown cooled, and she slowly sank beneath the surface. "This is a little harder to do when my feet aren't already touching the bottom," she said. "You're doing fine, Aunt Jenny," came Sasha's voice from the conch. Aunt Jenny dropped slowly down through the water until she was at the level of the Black Heart, which floated halfway between the lake bed and the surface. Her head swam. "Darn, this close to the heart is beginning to affect me. Pull me out if I go silent." I'm positioning the jar beneath the heart, raising it. It's in the heart. Fastening the lid. Trying again. Heating the wax. Fastening the lid. That worked. Pull me out. Clutching the jar, she let herself rise to the surface as the rope around her waist gently pulled her toward the shore. As she reached the surface, she heard Finna's echoey voice, "Aunt Jenny, let me take the jar," and realized that she had closed her eyes so that she could focus on holding it. She opened them, and there was the Perry floating in the air just a foot or two above her. The jar pulled upward, and when she released it, floated up into Finna's waiting grasp. As her feet began to scrape along the lake bottom, she called out, "Stop pulling. I think I can stand." She was unsteady and still groggy from the poison, but managed to walk most of the way under her own power. She reached the shore and saw the others in a dizzy fog ahead of her. Morwenna and Sasha ran to her side and helped support her as she staggered the last several feet. She sat down heavily, panting. Finna set aside the jar, leaving it floating in the air, and knelt down by Jenny. Slowly, without actually touching the suit, she ran her hands over it just above the surface, and after a few moments announced, "It has absorbed much of the poison. We must get it off you now." Aunt Jenny nodded, reached up, removed her helmet, and set it on the pebbly beach. Finna put on a pair of gloves of the same material as the suit, and slowly began to peel it off of Jenny in strips, depositing them in the helmet. Soon Aunt Jenny was dressed in a robe that Sasha had brought and feeling better. "Only one more task here. Finna, before you remove your gloves, can you fetch the green bottle from the inner pocket of my bag? It should be the only thing left there." "I have it." "Good. Back in Chaos Rim, when I made it, you could pour an endless stream of water from it. Could you fly out to where the heart was and try it? If it still works, suspend it so that it pours the water down on the poison. If it doesn't appear to be endless, try not to pour out more than half the contents and bring it back. It is the water of life, and I hope it will counteract the poison." "Yes, ma'am." Jenny flew off and returned shortly to report success. Aunt Jenny, who had laid back on the beach, said, "Wonderful. I don't suppose I could just take a nap here?" "'Twould be better in a bed, I should think," answered Finna. "Oh, very well. Taking Sasha's proffered hand, she stood. Finna stuffed the bag into the helmet with the contaminated suit pieces and flew them and the jar back to Castle Glass. The others followed on foot. Along the way, Rickert spoke to Aunt Jenny. "That was most impressive, ma'am. Truly worthy of a queen." "Thank you, but there's far more work ahead of us. We may have given the mother of monsters an unaccustomed setback and undone some of the damage, but she will be back, and there is much more in need of healing, more than any one of us can do." "That is true, ma'am, but your successes offer us a welcome change and a start of new things. What, if I may be so bold, will you essay?" "Immediately? A thorough bath, sleep, and food. Then off to Ilumcrown. Will you and your crew be staying on to assist the king and queen?" "Yes, ma'am. That is our charge. Might I ask you to convey a report to Queen Maeve?" "It would be my pleasure." Once she had bathed, slept, and eaten, Jenny sailed with Cat toward where the Black Heart had lain. They were able to get much closer before the poisons in the water and the air caused them to turn back. Clearly, the effects of the heart were dissipating. The next morning, Cat and the Blue Swan sailed for Ilumcrown. Chapter 19. The Queen's Crown. Thanks to Rickert, the Root Meat, and the Peafy lines, word of Aunt Jenny's adventures had spread, and they were expected in Ilumcrown. As a result, their reception was very different from her first arrival. Scores of boats and boat people sailed out to meet them, and the sky was filled with kite people, bird folk, pixies, fairies, and other winged fays. Merfolk and other water fays swam around them. Cat was a good deal smaller than the Blue Swan and could more easily navigate the crowded Grand Canal to the inner Harbor Royal. So Aunt Jenny, Sasha, Three, Morwenna, Helgrim, Philum, Drumthortle, and Geralt sailed with her, with Finna and a flock of Peafy lines flying overhead, while the Swan moored in the outer harbor. Aunt Jenny would have preferred to stick to her simple walking skirt and safari jacket, bag over her shoulder, but Morwenna and the others pressed her to dress as the adventurous queen. So it was that Jenny, in her spider silk suit and hose, fairy mail, her scarlet cloak and crown, with a rapier at her hip, led the leaders of her company from the royal pier to the palace. The chamberlain and an escort of palace guard met them on the great plaza and led them up the steps to the red door. As they climbed the steps, Finna alighted beside them, and the flock of Peafy lines distributed themselves on shoulders. Maeve received them in the main audience chamber, which was well packed with onlookers. "Aunt Jenny, sister, come join us," called Queen Maeve, gesturing to the throne next to hers, even before the chamberlain had announced them. As Jenny approached the stair, he called out in a stentorian voice, "Her Majesty Jennifer, the 12th Queen of Avalon, healer, teacher, scholar, hero, known as Aunt Jenny, late of the mortal lands." "Yes, yes," said Maeve, and then addressing Aunt Jenny, "I have not met all your company." Jenny stopped 2 steps from the top and turned. "You have, of course, met my companions, Sasha and Big Tom," gesturing to each as she named them, "my companions Morwenna, the Scout Three, and Rudy. Allow me to introduce Finna, Helgrim, Philum, and my old friend Drumthortle, who had accompanied me to Chaos Rim, along with our peacats and kitties. They are not, however, all of the company. The rest are with my friend, the boat Cat, or aboard the good ship Blue Swan, captained by the Nephil Tolkar. I look forward to meeting them all tomorrow at the royal ball and reception. I trust that little Dickens is well?" "Yes," said Aunt Jenny. "Meow," asserted the kitten, peeking out of Aunt Jenny's shoulder bag. "And how have you fared?" Aunt Jenny took another couple of steps upward and turned, resting one foot on the dais, knee bent, with the other foot on the second step down. Addressing both the Queen and the many who filled the chamber, she spoke in a voice trained by years of teaching. With the aid of these heroes and my company, we freed Three's people, the Marginalia, collapsing the city in chaos, and drove the enemy back for the moment. Traveling to the Shattered Isle, we have rescued the Shade of Vivian and seen the health of Vrayan of the Wolfdales, who was her king, improve. The Black Heart has been contained and removed from the Great Lake. Disposing of it still lies ahead, but with it removed from the lake and with the help of your people, we hope to see first Vrayan and the Isle begin to recover, and then all freed who suffer from the heart's poisons. Maeve had been informed of all this already, thanks to Rickart's magic, the root meat, the pea felines, and other messengers. Maeve had asked in front of the throng gathered in the chamber, and so Aunt Jenny spoke for their benefit. I am pleased to say that we recovered the gem known as the King's Eye, as well as this, the Fairy Crown, and the Serpent's Eye, she said, drawing the crown out of her bag and stepping forward, proffering it to Queen Maeve. Maeve took the crown amidst a buzz of gossip. Aunt Jenny could hear enough to make out that many were scandalized that the fairy crown had been desecrated by the alien Serpent's Eye. Stepping back to stand before the throne Maeve had offered her, Aunt Jenny took off her own crown and held it first for Maeve to see, and then, sweeping her arms, showed it to all who were gathered. You should know that this crown, assembled according to your advice, allowed me to gather and focus the power of chaos itself in order to bring down the city and give the false Rahab, she who was once a dragon, whom the king of Patala calls she who was once a human, a serious setback. The once human line received a few chuckles and a number of gasps from the audience. What may not be obvious without careful examination is that it consists of the crown of oak, ash, and thorn that you presented me with, skillfully intertwined by Finna the Peri with the serpent crown, which I received from the king of Patala, and in which is mounted an emerald taken from the heart of Kaf, by the order of the king of Jinnabad himself, carved and mounted by Bromerod the dwarf. Indeed, said Maeve, leaning closer to examine it, it is quite beautiful. And were it not for the contributions of so many folk, so many bloods, I could not have bested even temporarily one so powerful. Some take this crown as symbolic of my role as the 12th and last queen of Avalon, but I would be nothing but the missing hero without the cooperation of all these diverse peoples working in concert. If anything, it is the symbol of the power of collaboration and unity in the face of evil. A murmur of approval spread through the crowd, and the two queens smiled. I see, declared Queen Maeve, that your roles as teacher, healer, and scholar bring you the wisdom called for in a sister queen. That and good advisors, companions, and allies, Majesty. And with that, Aunt Jenny gave a little bow and sat on her designated throne. Well, said Maeve, as invigorating as your tale has been, I find that I am somewhat tired and in need of sustenance. This audience must draw to a close. She nodded to the chamberlain, who began to clear the room, except for Jenny and her company. Well done, sister, said Maeve, once the crowd had withdrawn. Aunt Jenny shrugged. It was no harder than a faculty staff meeting, she said, and they both laughed. I'm afraid you'll have to put up with days of celebration and pageantry and innumerable retellings of your tales. The piper must be paid. And so he was, at great length, and not just by Jenny. The whole company was feted, celebrated, questioned, and mobbed at a series of receptions, dinners, parties, and gatherings over the next several days. It wasn't all celebration and tale-telling, though. The time has come, said Maeve to Jenny in one of the few moments of quiet the two managed alone, to talk of crowns and gems. Yes, Jenny replied, sighing, I feel rather badly about it. About having to ask for the serpent's eye back. Don't worry. I understood that when you returned the crown to me. It was important that everyone see it returned, and underscoring the value of alliance is just as important. It is one of the greatest gifts that you bring us, being a liaison between peoples who have not always been friends. Yes, I heard the whisperings about the crown being corrupted or defiled with the serpent's eye, and I couldn't let that stand. The enemy is strengthened if the peoples of the half-lands are set against each other. But I promised the Serpent King that I would return the eye to him, as well as the crown he lent me, and I must do that. I understand, and I understand even as you returned the crown to me and spoke of yours. I understand, and I understood even as you returned the crown to me and spoke of yours. It's funny, I never wanted to wear a crown, to be seen as a queen. I only did it to help undo the damage caused by my absence. Still, this crown, she touched the one sitting cool upon her brow, I couldn't have sent her packing without it, and it does symbolize the cooperation I managed to elicit. It will be a shame to dismantle it. I find that I don't really want to give up my precious. Time enough for you to wrestle with that. For now, the task is to remove the serpent's eye from mine. And perhaps replace it? Asked Aunt Jenny. Perhaps. Have you any thoughts on a replacement? I did. This is the last large stone we were allowed to take from the heart of Kaf. Aunt Jenny pulled an emerald from her bag. Finna says that it is of remarkable power. Brahmarod carved it when we were setting the larger one in my crown. It's smaller than the serpent's eye, but your crown is more delicate than the serpent crown. Yes, 'tis well suited. I would be happy to have my smiths replace the eye with such a beautiful gem. Shall I have them disassemble your crown as well and reset the eye and the serpent's crown? No, Finna can untwine them, and I think that the king in Patala would sooner his people do the restoration. 2 days later, Jenny bid Maeve farewell, and the company set sail for Patala aboard Cat and the Blue Swan, accompanied by an escort of 6 Fey ships. 2 days after that, as they were approaching the towers of Iram, they were met by ships sailing out of the city. The lead ship came about to sail alongside Cat. Jianling Katun hailed from its bridge, "Welcome, sister! Permission to come aboard!" "Granted," called Aunt Jenny. Cat sidled up to the other ship, and the Katun leapt down from the deck of her larger ship with an ease that belied her age and stature. She was dressed much as Jenny had last seen her, gold-washed armor, leather, and purple silk. The only real difference was that her steel-gray hair was braided, and there were 2 sabers in her belt rather than one short, heavy sword. 3 of the Katun's iron horde loomed over the rail of her ship, one in silvery armor, clearly in charge, and scowling. Don't mind General Karadi. Where his grandfather made a career worrying about the wild antics of a girl general, he sees it his duty to fret over the fragility of an ancient and feeble Katun in her declining years, said Jianling before ringing out a hearty laugh. Well, he has no cause for alarm. I am sure that my skill as a healer will suffice if you totter too much. See, Karadi, nothing to worry of with Aunt Jenny here. The general continued to scowl. It is good to see you, Sister Ling. And you, Aunt Jenny. Sister Ling strode forward toward the prow. Patting the rail, she added, And you as well, Cat. You know, sister, your cat acquitted herself well when the siege was laid, and both resourceful and brave when she heard that you might need her. I am told, by your spies, no doubt, they tell me that Cat aided in getting you to Chaos so that you could liberate the marginalia of the city. Indeed, Cat is a valued member of the company. But did you come merely to see us, or is there some other purpose to you fretting General Karadi? Oh, causing him to fret is a joy in itself. But you are right. I came to extend my invitation to meet with me and 1 or 2 of my fellow counselors when you complete your business in Patala. I think we may be able to assist you. So you came personally to convey this invitation, just days after she attacked? I begin to see how you may have worried the general and his grandfather. It is no easy task, not after all these years. Well, I can hardly do anything but accept your kind invitation. We wouldn't want to have all that fretting for nothing. After a few more minutes of pleasantries, the Katun hailed her general. Throw down a ladder, Karadi. When he had, she scrambled up it and bid farewell to Jenny and Cat. When Ling was gone, Aunt Jenny called together several pea felines. "Tell the captains of the other ships to wait here for us. I don't want our flotilla to look like an invasion. When you have anchored, I want 6 of you to come with me," she told them. "Good idea, Aunt Jenny," chimed in Kat. The team that traveled on to Patala was pretty much the one that had ventured into Chaos. Kat had the rumblers Garl and Grolabut crewing for her, and the passengers consisted of Aunt Jenny, Sasha, Morwenna, 3, Finna, Helgrim, Philum, Drumthortle, Rudy, and the cats. Only about half of them had spent a night on Kat, but Aunt Jenny had called the others over for a morning strategy session with cutting back to just one boat in mind. The journey down the Gold and the Mother of Waters to the gates of Patala sped quickly by. "Time to put on our game faces, boys and girls," Aunt Jenny told the company. "You on my shoulder," she said to her Pea-Cat. "The rest aloft. When we get ashore, half with us, half with Cat." "Hail the gate," called Cat. "Comes now the Lady Jennifer, the 12th and last Queen of Avalon, healer, scholar, and teacher, to speak with His Royal Majesty the King in Patala." "Hail the ship. You have been announced. Follow the red boat within the gates." "No waiting this time," observed Sasha. "We're known and recognized now. Let's hope that's a good sign." The great river gates of Patala swung open, and once more Cat followed the red escort boat to the pier. As before, the blue-clad official met them. This time he was accompanied by a full dozen of the colorfully feathered dinosaur-like guards wearing blue enameled breastplates and helmets, and carrying swords and spears. Aunt Jenny strode from Cat's deck to the pier, a task that would have been more awkward had she bothered to let her foot touch the ground for the middle stride. There was a wide, railed gangplank off to one side, but the serpent folk hadn't bothered to deploy it for them. Aunt Jenny gestured, and it rose in the air to deploy itself. She could feel her crown cooling, and she was grateful for how close Patala was to chaos. The rumblers stayed with Cat, but the rest of the company followed Jenny off the boat. Rudy and Tom took up their positions to either side of her. Sasha and Morwenna, Philum and Drumthortle followed 2 by 2. Finna rose into the air, and Helgrim took up the rear. Her Pea-Cat alighted on Aunt Jenny's shoulder, and 2 Pea-Kitties settled on Sasha's and Morwenna's. Once everyone was ashore and in position, Aunt Jenny gestured for the official to lead the way. He did, and as they followed through the underground city, Aunt Jenny could hear several variations on her name in the murmurs of the gathering crowd. Once again they traveled up the grand stairway to the king's palace and made their way down the strange corridor to the otherworldly orchard or conservatory where she had first met him. Once more they rounded the hedge to find his long serpentine form stretched out on cushions. This time there were 2 silk-clad females sharing the cushions with him, both humanoid. One had a beautifully human face, olive skin, and a huge tumble of black silky hair. The other had a much more snake-like head and scales in an elaborate pattern of gold and bronze. The more humanoid one was feeding him mice from a bowl. The snake-like one held an elaborate flagon. "Comes now the Lady Jennifer," began the official, but the king cut him off. Yes, the Mouse Queen. I can see." He gestured in bored dismissal, and the official backed away. Turning his gaze upon Jenny and the company, he continued, "And you have brought some little friends this time." Aunt Jenny bowed deeply, her right hand sweeping out to her side and behind her. "Your Majesty, allow me to present those who traveled with me to liberate the city in chaos. Sasha of Hakamak and the Marginalis Scout 3 you met before. These are the Fey Morwenna, Drumthortle of High Dwarrowguard, the Nephil Helgrim, and Lady Finna of the Perrys." "Yes, well, we have heard of your alliance, and how we, and others working all together with you, and all your friends, did what no one people could, and resisted she who was once a human. It must have been glorious. And now you have come to to return your property to you. Aunt Jenny reached into her bag and pulled out the silken bundle holding the serpent's eye. And now we will find out, next time, how the king of Patala, the Dragon King, takes being given a favor by a human.